You're listening to ARC.
Do you remember discovering echo as a child? The strange sensation of hearing your own voice, but not really. Of reflection and reverberation, making the familiar strange and distorted. I have a similar feeling of hearing something that I kinda know what is, but don't really understand when I first get hold of a unique set of field recordings that have been sitting in an archive in Vienna for more than 100 years. It's a collection of recordings made by Rudolf Pöch when he traveled through the Kalahari in the beginning of the 20th century. At first, the sound is distorted, almost beyond recognition. I hear static and some voices, but mainly it's just noise. But when I run the recordings through modern sound restoration software, something happens. The static fades into the background and voices appear. Singing, speech in languages I don't understand, by speakers I don't know anything about. Like strange echoes from the past.
And I call up researcher Anette Hoffmann, who's written a book about Rudolf Pöch's recordings, and ask her if she remembers feeling the same when she listened to the tapes for the first time.
I actually don't, and I also don't think it's so terribly important. I mean, I think we get too fascinated with our own reactions.
Too fascinated with our own reactions. Too absorbed in our own perspective. An easy trap to walk into as a storyteller, like I just did.
I think we have to keep in mind that whoever is speaking has not been speaking to us.
But Anette does agree with me about the echo. To be honest, it's also her idea.
I thought about them as echo, in the sense that they might only respond to a particular question or to a particular prompting, but then often there's a slight difference in the resonance. Something else comes up that maybe the researcher hasn't asked, like with an echo that comes like with a slightly different, focus when you hear it.
This is the Unburied Podcast series about the Austrian anthropologist Rudolf Pöch, who spent 3 years in the Kalahari in the beginning of the 20th century. He collected objects, film, sound recordings, and bones from more than 170 people. In this episode, we'll examine the echoes from the past, etched into the grooves on wax cylinders and old brittle records. We're gonna see what they can tell us about not just Rudolf Pöch, but all the others in the Kalahari at the time. And we'll continue our journey to answer this question. Why did Rudolf Pöch take all those bones?
My name is Rasmus Spitz, and this is episode 2, Voices from the Graves. When we left Rudolf Pöch in the previous episode, he was sitting on his ox wagon, heading into the desert with his broad-brimmed felt hat. The brave explorer heading into unknown territory in service of science. And for many years, this was exactly how he was described. Here is Sophie Chasiepen, the researcher who wrote her PhD about Pöch's Kalahari expedition.
You will find the exact same phrases in a time period spanning like 50 years, in which he, of course, always is the lone heroic researcher.
For decades, if not centuries, this idea of the explorer as a kind of Indiana Jonesy character has been the way these guys were depicted.
He also has his vulnerable moments, but mainly he's just, a man who really sacrifices a lot for science and blah, blah, blah. You'll have all these different descriptions.
And that's why this image is so easy for me to conjure up. It's embedded deep in my mind, so deep that even when I know it's inaccurate, it's hard to escape. But where does it come from? Well, if we look at Rudolf Pöch, it originates with him. He's the key witness to his own story, and the people he met in the Kalahari published nothing at all. So even if we do want to tell a more accurate version of history, it's difficult. Because only one side of the story has been available for so long. And that's why we must listen to the echo. Rudolf Pöch brought 2 recording devices to the Kalahari. One of them recorded onto LP-like records. These were the best recordings and the ones he used for his serious work.
And the records were used for language recordings which were meticulously prepared and which he later also tried to translate.
They sounded something like this. But there was also another recorder, a portable phonograph that recorded onto wax cylinders.
It's a small apparatus, maybe the size of a sewing machine, and you can carry it around and you can crank it up, and you don't need electricity, and you can play it back. And that's very important.
With the small phonograph, he was able to demonstrate to people what was happening.
So what he did is he did use the wax cylinder recordings to play around. So there is all kinds of very bad recorded choir singing, and I think he also recorded himself to be able to play it back to people, to show them what's happening when he's recording. That's what I think he did, right?
While the content on the records was documented, what he recorded on the wax cylinders wasn't.
Yeah, the wax cylinders, there's no documentation. He didn't fill in protocols for that. So for the wax cylinders, we really can't tell 100% what's on them.
To the extent that it's possible to hear and translate, the wax cylinders might contain a less curated version of reality, one that's different from the official version of the story.
You're dealing with those fragments, with those acoustic bits that you actually get, and then you have to kind of try to piece together what the meaning could be.
Like puzzle pieces, Anette Hoffmann tries to piece together echoes hidden in the grooves of records and cylinders. And very often, she says, what she finds has never been listened to before.
It sounds very banal, but for years people have engaged with recordings only in terms of the written documentation. So I have learned to really mistrust this documentation.
In a way, Anette looks for all the bits that never make it into the story. Like when I record an interview, I often start by asking people what they had for breakfast. Not because that matters, but just to have them talk while I adjust the sound levels. In a way, Anette is looking for the 100-year-old version of that.
Like if during a war you ask people what they had for breakfast, and then one person said they had scrambled eggs and the other person said I had nothing, because there isn't anything to eat, right? And that's an information.
Information that no one has seen for 100 years.
They didn't do anything with it because they filed it away as example sentence, but still the information is there.
In the phonographic archive of the Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna, where Pöch's recordings are stored, they're described as more than valuable in comparative linguistic respects. That's the official version.
It doesn't mention breakfast foods or anything else that might have leaked onto the records.
Pöch himself is described as a pioneer in phonographic, photographic and cinematographic fieldwork. There's no mention of any bones. This is the voice of Kxara, or at least that's the name he has in the archives. The information, according to Anette Hoffmann, is not particularly reliable. She calls him Kxara the Younger to distinguish him from another man who has been given the same name, someone you'll meet later. But whatever his actual full name is, Kxara appears all over Pöch's research. He's on the recordings in several pictures, and Pöch writes about him.
He mentions him as somebody who translated. It's also clear that he cooked for him and that he helped him with or maybe did organize the traveling with the ox wagon and all that stuff. I think he did a lot of things.
One of the pictures of Kxara the Younger is a portrait. His hair is close cropped, he's clean shaven, and he wears a worn white linen shirt. He looks directly at the camera with the expression you'd make for a passport photo. In at least 2 pictures, he's wearing a kind of costume with a leather belt across the chest, a type of sarong, and what appears to be a towel wrapped around his head. There's no explanation for the costumes, but the pictures are taken by Pöch. It seems odd, a strange and distorted echo of a moment that may have been playful, serious, or even sinister. Without context, it's impossible to know. One picture shows Kxara at work. He's standing holding on to the large funnel of the phonograph. The recording device itself is on a large wooden box on the ground where 2 young women and a child are kneeling. They're listening through headphones that looks like a doctor's stethoscope. They might be hearing their own voices for the very first time. Kxara appears to be fully in control of the device and the situation. And perhaps this proves that the groundbreaking field recordings were not done by Pöch alone.
I mean, he could have not done it alone. So he worked with Kxara, and who translated for him and helped him actually produce the recordings.
And then there are the recordings themselves. Kxara appears on several. But maybe the most interesting is this one. In his notes, Pöch writes that it's recorded for the sake of the click sounds of the Bushman language. There's no translation. But Job Morris, the translator working with Anette Hoffmann, has re-listened to the tapes and found something much more interesting than a so-called language sample. Because on the recording, Kxara sounds annoyed. He says, "Instead of accepting gifts, then you run away. He wants one of you. He told me he doesn't kill people." So who is Kxara speaking to, and why are they afraid of being killed? Anette Hoffmann thinks that he's addressing rumors circulating amongst the speakers of Naro, the language Pöch wanted to record.
There weren't thousands of Naro speakers. There were some. I think that they were in contact with each other. I think there was a network of people, and I think whatever Pöch did was filtering through those networks to other people.
But still, why do they fear being killed? Or what does this particular echo say about how Rudolf Pöch was received in the Kalahari? The farm called Zachas in the Gobabis district of German Southwest Africa is a model farm. That's what the local authorities say. The owner of the farm is a former soldier named Eduard Balser, and it isn't unusual to hear the sound of spades and picks cutting through the dry crust of the land. Balser is known to demand hard labor from his workers, but in March 1908, it's not for him they're digging.
The first documented acquisition, so to speak, is happening in Namibia. And he writes down the name of the farmer who allows him to dig out remains of people.
I imagine Rudolf Pöch in the shade under a tree speaking German to Farmer Balser, while the workers are digging up the graves of people they almost certainly knew in life. The bodies of 2 men and a woman who'd been buried a few years earlier. People the workers might have been related to. Zachas farm is where Pöch first digs up bodies in the Kalahari. The farm the German authorities considers a model farm. They like Farmer Balser too, because he's known to be able to tame the bushmen that work for him. Taming is, of course, not something you do to people. It's something you do with animals. And that says everything about the status of the workers at Zachas farm in 1908. People without much choice, living within a deeply racist system.
It was very difficult to make a living in a zone where, close to the border, where things were unstable.
To make matters worse, the government had banned so-called vagrancy, moving around without a set residence or a formal job. The traditional way of life for the San or the bushman.
It was clear that foraging or hunting and these things were no longer possible, and they were trying to survive somehow.
For Farmer Balser at Zachas farm, the precarious existence of the indigenous people in the area is not a tragedy. It's an opportunity.
The farmer was notoriously bankrupt. He was one of those German soldiers who had bought one of those farms in this dry area, and he had ideas of what he could do there, and it actually didn't work. So I think he used the bodies of the people who were dug out by Pöch as resources. He sold them.
Farmer Balser is not good at the things that under normal circumstances make a farmer successful, like growing crops and raising livestock. But he understands that the dry land holds other resources, the bones of his workers.
He appears in other records, and it's very likely that that farmer actually, used this as a kind of complementary business.
And Balser isn't the only one benefiting from the situation. Pöch, of course, is too. So this might be the echo of the recording with Kxara. The people he addresses in the recording are afraid of being killed because they live under the constant threat of death and violence.
But I think this thing he told me he doesn't kill people could be related to he digs out bodies, but he doesn't actively kill people. It could be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be like that.
Kxara is a man who's trying to navigate a tricky situation. He may be telling his peers that Pöch is the lesser of many evils. Because while he does dig up dead bodies, he doesn't actively kill. Another of Rudolf Pöch's many pictures from the Kalahari is a portrait of a man wearing a broad-brimmed hat and a corduroy jacket. He squints, but looks directly into the camera. He has a thin mustache and looks like he could have starred in a Western movie. And this is his voice. This is Rudolf Pöch's recording labeled 787, and it's bad. With some processing, it becomes slightly more audible, but so far, this hasn't been translated. According to the protocol written by Rudolf Pöch, the voice belongs to a man named Kxara. And his appearance is no coincidence.
What we do know is that Kxara had worked for the German geologist Siegfried Passage before. And he appears in the books that Passage has published.
Passage is a German geologist who's been traveling through the Kalahari a few years earlier. And it's from his writings that Pöch knows where to find Kxara.
He makes this note in one of his notebooks that he found Kxara, who had worked for Passage at the farm of a man called Talliard, which means he went actively searching for him. So that's quite important, I think.
Rudolf Pöch is interested in some of the research that Passage has left unfinished. But he doesn't know much about the land. Kxara, on the other hand, does.
He wanted to tap into that knowledge to answer some questions that Passage could not answer. And that's why, so he basically consulted him as an expert. Of course, he never says so, but that's what he did, actually.
Like Kxara, Kxara isn't credited for his contribution to Pöch's research. He isn't mentioned as an expert, and the payment for his services, well, they don't go to him. According to the notes, Kxara says, "I work for Jakob. The doctor calls. Quickly, I'm there. Jakob demands a lot of money. However, I do not get it. It's a shame."
Pöch came and asked him to work for him, and he went there. He walked there all the way, and he knows that he doesn't get paid because he basically was borrowed out by the farmer, and the farmer gets paid, and Kxara is not going to see a penny. So that's a very rare testimony of a situation like that.
Tape 787, Pöch's notes, and the black and white picture doesn't say much about who Kxara is. He's a seasoned field expert whose assistance at least 2 German scientists seek out. He looks confident and appears to not be afraid to talk about the unfair conditions he's working under. And yet, he isn't able to do much about it. A fact that's exploited by both the farmer who rents him out and Rudolf Pöch. From present-day Namibia, Pöch travels deeper into the Kalahari, across the borders that divide only bushes and sand from other bushes and more sand. Part of the way, he's traveling with armed military escort, and other times he's accompanied by locals like Kxara and Kxara. Their knowledge is essential, not only for his collections, but also for his survival.
And I think without these 2 guys, Pöch would have done nothing, actually.
It seems like both of them are well aware of the situation, how unfair it is. And still, they go on to assist Pöch.
They were both men who had to make a living in a war zone.
In Pöch's reports, he claims everything is going well. Nobody is complaining. But the echo clearly tells a different story. The objections to Pöch's work are faint, but they are insistent.
Perhaps the most insistent is the other Kxara, the man Anette Hoffmann calls Kxara the Elder.
Not much is known about him, but he doesn't appear to have been working for Pöch, whom he clearly doesn't like.
He kind of berates Pöch and asks him why he doesn't share his food. He says something, "What is it with you that you can eat and I'm just walking beside you all? Am I not just like you? Why are you doing this?"
There's a picture of Kxara the Elder in Pöch's records. It's in profile, like a mugshot. He doesn't wear a shirt, but wears the fur hat of a hunter. Older bushman is how Pöch describes him. He doesn't look happy in the picture, but that obviously doesn't mean much. Nobody smiled in pictures 100 years ago. But the second recording of Kxara suggests that he really is upset.
And then the other one is, of course, maybe even more spectacular in a way, because he asks his knife back.
So what has happened there? Like, it seems like Pöch might have taken a knife from him.
I mean, this is again the echo situation. We don't know exactly what the situation is. We don't know what happened before that. But the knives that people had in these areas were trade objects. They bought them mostly from Oshivambo speakers in the north, and they traded them against animal skins and stuff like that. Now, in this war situation, it's very difficult to get animal skins if you're not allowed to hunt anymore, right? So knives would have been a very precious thing to own, and also absolutely necessary for everyday life, right?
Why Pöch has Kxara's knife isn't clear.
And it could be that he maybe borrowed his knife to Pöch, or maybe Pöch kind of persuaded him to give it to him. But remember, they couldn't communicate properly. So maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe he thought he borrows the knife and Pöch thought he puts it into his collection.
Misunderstanding or not, Kxara makes it very clear that he wants his knife back.
And he repeats, give the knife back 8 times in this recording. And I think this is stunning.
Yeah, and then in the end, or at some point, he even says, like, today you will not sleep keeping my knife. I mean, it sounds very dramatic. It almost sounds like a threat.
It could be.
We don't know if Kxara the Elder got his knife back. We don't know what happened to Kxara the Younger or to Gosi Tsai. The echo only takes us so far. But there's one last recording that I want you to hear.
Bring some wood for fire, and then he goes to the creek and he drinks water, you know?
Nowhere in the phonographic archives of the Academy of Sciences is this voice registered. But as you might have guessed, it's very likely Pöch. Let's hear it again.
Bring some wood for fire, and then he goes to the creek and he drinks water, you know?
We bring some wood for fire. Then we go to the pit and drink some water, he says. He then goes on to ask in Afrikaans, Is jullie bang? Are you afraid? Then he switches to German and asks, Denkt die ich will die fressen? Do you think I'll eat you? Is this a game, a joke? Or is Pöch threatening Kxara? Or is he making fun of him? I don't know. Because even when you listen to the echo, the distortions of prejudice, time, language and power leaves us with a void. The vast majority of what we know about what happened in the Kalahari, we still know from Rudolf Pöch himself. But listening deeply to the recordings has made Anette Hoffmann think critically about the man who for nearly a century was the most important figure of anthropology in Austria.
what Pöch wants to do is a racial study. And Pöch is clearly racist, right? And there is a hierarchy in his mind of, the position of people socially. So he clearly thinks that he basically is in the position to force people to do whatever he wants them to do. And he does that when he can, right?
I mean, obviously, if you look at Pöch from today's point of view, I mean, you see him, it's easy to see him as like a bad man. But would you say that he is simply a product of his training and his time?
No, I think it's never that simple. And I don't think it's okay to say, oh, well, yeah, that's what they did during that time. Yeah, many people did that, but there were people who didn't. I think there were choices. And Pöch made his choices. And these choices that he made were racist and fascist. I don't think we should let them get away with this so easily.
As Rudolf Pöch travels across the desert, he understands how much he can get away with. That he's protected by his race, his status, and his weapons. And the people he meets understand this too. They also understand that they've been reduced to a commodity. In life, they are traded between farmers and scientists, or rented out, like Kxara and Kxara. And then there are all the bones. In this episode, you heard about the first graves Pöch dug up. But there were many, many more. And as I read, it seems to me that the further Pöch travels, the more obsessed he gets with digging up graves and stealing bones. Here is researcher Sophie Shasipen.
I mean, there's a reason that you get that impression, because that's the impression that I'm trying to give in my... because that was the impression that I had, and the numbers do speak to it, I mean, at least if we believe his notes. There is a kind of almost frenzy towards the end of his stay.
You've been listening to the Unburied Podcast series, a production by ARC in partnership with Iziko Museums of South Africa, and made possible by listeners like you. A small but growing number of listeners are becoming archangels, supporters of our work. And to you, thank you so much. If you want to join the archangels for ad-free listening, bonus content, and the knowledge that we could not do this without you, click on the link in the show notes or go to our website arcdocs.org. This series is produced, written and sound designed by myself and Neil Liddell, with support from Dane Dutz, Naima Malaika, Brian Minis, Neil Rush, and most of all, the archaeology unit at the Iziko South African Museum in Cape Town. For a deeper understanding of the colonial archive and the recordings you've heard in this episode, I highly recommend looking up Anette Hoffmann's book, Listening to Colonial History. My name is Rasmus Spitz, and if you like what you hear, please share it with the people you like.